This week will be ringing in the new year, and that means a new Chinese zodiac sign. For those unaware, there's this 2,000-year-old story originating in the Han Dynasty about this 12-year-long calendar system. And while Chinese New Year isn't until the end of January, I figure why not get a start on it now? And this year, we have Snake, but Snake Hard Draw. So yeah, I decided that I wanted to draw a different snake-type Pokemon for each Pokemon type. And apparently I'm not the only one who got in on this whole snake love situation going on this year.
Paul Rudd and Jack Black star in The Anaconda!
Who is this for? Regardless, let's take a look at what we'll be working with. A quick Google search on what snake Pokemon already exist returned less than helpful results. I had to dig a little bit deeper. See, we've pretty much got Poison down with Arbok and Ekans, as well as Seviper. Well, the Superior line has Grass, and Sandaconda has Ground. Here's where we get a little gray on the whole situation that we're looking at here. Onix, I never would have considered as a snake Pokemon, but it is categorized as the rock snake Pokemon, so I guess I really didn't have a choice there. Milotic is an ambiguous serpentine figure, but is very clearly not an eel, so I guess that also covers our water types. Now, the original theory for the fire starters was that they actually followed this Chinese zodiac. You had your dragon, you had your rat, you had your tiger, and then that kind of got screwed up with some people saying, well, Fennekin is actually a dog and Fuecoco is a serpent, and that's not even remotely true. Hi, it's Editing Stern. Just want to get ahead of this. I did look it up, and foxes are in the family Canidae, which is a family that dogs are in as well, but that does not make them dogs. It makes dogs Canidae and makes foxes Canidae, but foxes not dogs. Okay, back to what we were doing. So I figure, why not fix those wrongs and start off with our snake-like fire starter. Hello, specifically to people named Daniel. I'm the Thesterninator, but my friends call me Stern. Welcome to the channel, so glad you're here. While you're here, don't forget to drop down below and like, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff that makes YouTube and me happy, and let's hop into the video. So for the fire starter, I knew that I had to do a couple things. Being that this wasn't just your standard Pokemon, it was in fact meant to feel like a starter, I knew that I had to give it some form of emotion. All of our starters across all the different generations have some sort of energy to them, whether they be a little bit more timid, a little bit more brave, a little bit more angry or angsty. They all have some sort of emotion. So I went with this fire starter feeling scared. I think one of the reasons that we tie those emotions into the starters is because it's one of the few Pokemon that you have to know a little something about prior to catching it. You have to have some sort of bond or some sort of connection. So I thought this Pokemon should feel very timid. It should feel like it doesn't necessarily want to be in the fight. And I think that's super cute. I think that's super wholesome. So I went with that, at least for this first stage, because you have to evolve not just the Pokemon as it evolves, but also that emotion tied in. So starting with a very timid type of feel, I knew that there were a couple directions that I could go. And keeping those in mind as I drew out this form and the other forms that came after it really helped to involve me in the process of that energy, of where I wanted to point the emotions of this Pokemon. It's just part of kind of having a plan prior to starting the design and being able to fulfill that as you go. It informed me on what I wanted this Pokemon to feel like, what I wanted the facial features to evoke. So without much further ado, here we have a Spent. The name is a combination of Ash and Serpent. For the shiny, we of course had to go with Shiny Fire Blue, and I just dig this little dude. I would be lying if I said that the hair wasn't inspired by anxiety from Inside Out, so there he is. As we venture further into this concept, I wanted to change up a couple of the shapes. Something that I've noticed as Pokemon evolve, specifically starter Pokemon, is the shape changes drastically, often between the first and second form. I think specifically of Pokemon like Chikorita evolving into Bayleaf and how they become stretched out. That shape evolves exponentially into something else. I also think of other Pokemon such as Litten and how when evolving into Terracat, it becomes much more harsh and much sharper on its angles. So I wanted to do that here. Changing that round and ovalish face into more of a snake-like appearance had to be key. I also knew that I wanted this to eventually become a cobra, so I had to involve a couple of the shapes that would make that make sense as it got bigger and evolved as well. I wanted to turn a couple of these areas here into scales. That's something with Milotic's design that I really enjoy, and I wanted to carry it into this design as well. But I knew that I had a very different purpose in doing so, one that hopefully will become more evident as we move closer into that final design. I really had a fun time with these concepts and actually ended up designing the fire type way before I started this video. I had the idea for this final stage, and having that idea in my mind of where I wanted to go allowed me to create these other forms. I drew that one way before the rest, but ended up redesigning it as I went into this type of video challengey thing. So I kind of got to backtrack on this design, which I don't normally get to do. Usually when I draw these designs, I start with the smallest and draw more stuff as it evolves. This one I got to work backwards, and I really enjoyed it. It got me in a different way of thinking, and this type of challenge really allowed me to flex some of those artistic muscles and also made it a little bit easier. It's definitely a lesson that I'm going to be taking with me into the new year, and hopefully will make some of these designs a little bit more cohesive and make things stick together a little bit more. You'll also notice as I get into this final design for Surrender that I changed up the shape of the face just a little bit. I wanted to evoke that idea of the cartoons where a bomb explodes in someone's face. I thought that would be so funny with that Pichu type of experience where it doesn't yet know how to control its power. Now comes the final design, and definitely the one that inspired the entirety of this video. This design allowed me to look at serpents and snakes in a different way. I really was not joking in the intro when I said, drawing snakes is hard. It's such a simple design for a real life animal that how can you make that exciting, and how can you make it different across 18 separate typings to Pokemon? It was a challenge, but I got to start out with something that I was a little bit more familiar with none of those restrictions on this design. I got to go in wholeheartedly. I didn't have to think, well, I need to do something different from the previous design because this was the first one. And I got to go a little bit more crazy with it. I wanted it to feel a little bit more complex. I've also noticed that a lot of the final evolutions, especially in later generations, get increasingly more complex. I think of how Fennekin evolves into Delphox and how it goes from being this very simple, two-colored shaped Fennec Fox into this witchy type of exterior, and how it gets so much more patterns and so much more lore and ideas to it as it gets bigger. So when designing this Pokemon, I thought, what if it resembled a fire pit? This bundle of coals on the bottom with this massive flame erupting out of it. Almost kind of like a funeral pyre or a ritualistic flame. Something like that. I also got to inspire it with the idea of it being almost that look of the cobra coiled in the basket. So a few different ideas here that came together and I think work really well. I got to play with how the cobra's hood became this erupting fire to further involve that idea of it looking like coals with this fire coming out of it. And that's something that pushed me as well into saying, well, if I'm gonna make this be inspired by that, then it should have the aspects of those things. I feel like I'm talking over myself and repeating myself a little bit, but I just really dig this design, and it gave me a lot of confidence going into the rest to say, okay, yeah, I can make a bunch of different snakes and make them exciting and enticing in various different ways. Little did I know the challenges that would arise after this, but this was definitely a design that I really enjoyed, and I think the lore that builds it make it so much more exciting. So this is Scoruptor. Its name coming from Scorch and Eruptor while also having that ska sound, like scale, or that sound that snakes make. That blue shiny is so cool, and I dig this Pokemon so much. So with fire done and out of the way, that still leaves us with 12. Unless we account for Jormungandr, the world snake, the inspiration behind Zygarde's 50% form, which is ground type much like Sandaconda, but also allows us to cover our dragon typing. That whittles us down to 11 now left. Tackling the next one as a phrase makes a lot of sense here, because I wanted to jump into fighting Pokemon. And how do you make a fighting Pokemon that doesn't have arms? So I thought about how boa constrictors squeeze their prey in this grappling type of fighting style without actually having arms or many other appendages. So I went in and thought, what if it was a snake that was constantly kind of rotating around itself, almost like it's enticing you into a fight so that it can grapple and strangle its opponent? I thought that'd be really cool. So I came up with this very animated looking design of this infinity shape. I picture it constantly moving and wanted to find other ways to evoke that same type of look as well. So when going in with the color later, you'll see that I actually bring in some shapes that I'm hoping bring up the idea of broken chains, that this Pokemon itself is unbound and is dangerous. I picture it very much as a Pokemon that you wouldn't want to come across because it wants to fight you as much as it wants to fight your Pokemon. I really dig it, and I will be honest with this, very much inspired by that Anaconda trailer that's been looping around the internet lately. I don't know who that movie's for. I don't know who was asking for a new Anaconda movie, but I do know this. It definitely gave me some inspiration for what to do with this Pokemon, really making it a boa constrictor Anaconda hybrid. But yeah, I really like it. I know it's really simple, but I feel like it really brings in that idea that we see in Generation 1 and 2 of what if Pokemon with a little bit more fantastical elements. So I think it works. I hope it works. I would like to think that it works. It's very much just a snake on the outside, but I feel like that fantastical element comes in the motion and the relay of how the body works. I mean, we have a rock Pokemon that's Geodude, that's a rock with arms. So if we can have a rock with arms as a Pokemon, then I think that we can have just a regular snake. Maybe if I ever redesign this, I'll make it just a bit more fantastical. I did just want to keep it kind of simple, so I feel like it really fulfills that want for the design. So this is Bocep, the name coming from bicep as well as boa. It is the constricting Pokemon, a pure fighting type, and for the shiny, I went with that algae-ish green that you often associate with cartoony snakes. Absolutely massive guy, very much a unit, and I dig him. This next design I very much had the most fun with. While it is simple and very geometric, I think that the inspiration of jumper cables for our electric type snake is so fun and allows me to create this two-headed type of Pokemon. I love two-headed Pokemon. I know that I'm often in the minority on this of liking two-headed Pokemon or multi-headed Pokemon, and I also like a lot of inanimate object Pokemon. So I know I'm very much in an area of design that a lot of people kind of frown at, but I really, really like it. So I made a two-headed inanimate object Pokemon with jumper cables as the base element to it. Maybe it's because my car breaks down a lot, so I'm very familiar with jumper cables, but I thought it was a ton of fun. I also want to ask you guys while I'm here, while I'm talking about this guy, you'll notice that I haven't done any abilities for the write-ups and the dex entries for these guys, so this is often where I ask you guys for help. I am terrible at coming up with abilities, so go down into the comments and let me know what abilities you think the Pokemon in this video should have, whether that be ones that already exist or ones that you come up with on the fly. I'm always so interested to hear what you guys have in mind for these designs, especially since I am, like I've said, that is very much one of my weak points, is abilities for Pokemon. I'm a design guy, I'm not a meta type of dude, so let me know. I'll see you down in the comments, and I do read through those, at least for the first 2 days of these videos. I check those religiously, and even after that, I'll scroll through, and if I find one that I really like, I make sure to like it. So yeah, let me know. You can also find me on the Discord, which is linked down in the description, where we can talk more about these Pokemon. I love having conversations about these guys and about the Pokemon that you guys come up with as well. It's a ton of fun, really great community, and I hope that I can see you there because I love hanging out with you guys. I love talking and being a part of this community. So yeah, down in the description, I love this Pokemon. This is Ambithon. Its name comes from amp as well as python, replacing that pi in python and amp with bi for two, so it is 2 amp pythons. A jumpstart Pokemon, a pure electric type, and that shiny, I love that purple electricity. Coming into the ice type, I used some of the lessons that I learned with our fire type and actually designed an evolution first. I actually designed 2 different evolutions, one of which did not make it into the video because I liked the other one so much more. But if you want to see some scrapped content, you can always join me at the Patreon, where I tend to load up a lot of the stuff that wasn't used in videos, so that'll be there. But for this one, I knew where I wanted to go for the end, so being that I was actually designing this pre-evolution after the final form, I got some inspiration. I wanted to make this little icicle snot drip that is so much fun, and I actually was inspired by this design for this story of this snake found in Thailand that seemingly was covered in fur. It was a water-dwelling snake, and this fur was actually an algae that had attached to it, making it look like it was wearing a coat. So I thought, well, if this is a cold-blooded animal, how better would it adapt to a colder climate and being an ice type, other than having this big coat? Even with that coat, you can see it's still a little bit sickly. It has that snot drip. It has these flared up nostrils that almost double as tears on this Pokemon, and I think it is so cute, and I'm so excited to show you what it evolves into. But for the moment, this is Glaceite, cold-blooded Pokemon, a pure ice type, and for that shiny, it's a little bit greener, a little bit more sickly, and he looks like a little worm, and I think he's adorable. Let's see what kind of terrible, horrifying Eldritch Abomination he turns into. So with Glaceite evolving, I wanted something that expanded on a lot of the ideas, but since I actually did this one first, I worked in reverse, kind of limited them down for Glaceite. So for this one, I went with that same type of energy. I brought in those like drippy snot icicles. I did this one before I did Glaceite, so this was the inspiration for that. I thought, what if this snake, instead of having fangs, had icicles that were just naturally occurring? I also wanted it to feel very Yeti inspired, so I gave it this big unibrow, as well as this big fluffy coat. Listen, I could go on and on why some of these decisions were made. Ultimately, some of them just felt right. They felt like a fun way to break up the shapes, or to make something have a certain emotion to it, make the Pokemon have a personality all its own. So I made a lot of decisions here ultimately because they felt cool. I also drew an inspiration, like I said, from that sweater wearing snake found in Thailand. That was really fun. When kind of starting on a lot of these, when I don't know what direction I want to go, I'll often just type in stuff into Google, see if there's any stories or animals that already fit that niche that I'm not aware of. And luckily for this one, there was something that fit perfectly. I think I typed in snake in sweater or furry snake, and luckily I got some really good responses from that, some really good hits that allowed me to be able to work out the base of an idea and evolve it from there. It's a Yeti snake with icicle fangs. I don't understand how that couldn't be cool. I don't understand how that couldn't just work, and it really helped, especially being that me knowing that snakes are cold-blooded on my own probably couldn't figure out a way to make this work without that base inspiration. So seek that type of stuff whenever looking to draw something. So this is Glacier. Its name coming from glacial and sire. Cold-blooded Pokemon, pure ice type. That shiny still keeps that sickly color, and I dig it. This would definitely be a Pokemon that I would be out shiny hunting for that neon green type of look. So I mentioned at the beginning that Onix fulfills our rock snake Pokemon for this challenge. It never once occurred to me until actually recording these lines that therefore Steelix would suffice our steel type. That an evolution to an already existing Pokemon would fulfill that prompt. And ironically, I did the exact same thing that already happened, that already counted. Giving a Pokemon that already exists a new evolution so that I could take care of the steel prompt. I thought about Seviper and how it's a poison type, but it has this big blade at the end of its tail. It felt like it should be steel type. So I took that blade and expanded on it. Brought it into a realm where it felt like steel type would work, making this huge glaive at the end of its tail, changing its fangs a little bit to feel more like these daggers and just making it overall sharper, while still trying to keep that ramshackled together look that Seviper has. I got a chance to really look at the design of Seviper when doing this drawing, and there is a lot going on with that Pokemon. It has this gold embellishments to it. It is poison very clearly from its coloring. Its face is split in half by two different colors. It has these gold pieces about it. It has a knife tail. It has these splotches of paint looking toxin or poison all over its body. There is so much going on that I thought, I see now why this Pokemon doesn't have an evolution. Despite the fact that in the anime they incorrectly state that it's an evolution to Arbok, it made a ton of sense to me why this guy doesn't evolve, and I hope that we do eventually get a chance to see it do so, but for me it was looking at it, breaking it down, and realizing I may have bit off more than I could chew here. So this is Visaber, Fang Snake Pokemon, a Steel type. The shiny matches very closely to what Seviper already has, but I got to play with that a little bit. The biggest thing was trying to make the knife tail not look like it was covered in blood. I don't think that I succeeded. Now, Ghost is definitely an interesting one. It's one that I racked my brain around what to do for the longest time. I could do a shedded skin as a snake. I could do some sort of Black Mamba-esque with that vibrant blue mouth, being one of the deadliest snakes in the world. But potentially, we may already have a ghost snake Pokemon. That may be Giratina. And I know, Giratina looks like a big dinosaur, but its lore gets expanded upon for its origin form, where it loses its legs and was banished to this distortion realm. This sounds eerily familiar to the biblical tellings of Satan being sent into hell, losing his legs, being forced to crawl on his belly. And if that's the case, and we take that inspiration as fact for the inspiration of this Pokemon, then that means that Giratina rounds out our ghost-type Fakemon. So with Ghost-type taken care of, I decided to hop into something that I always felt was very much associated to the Ghost-type, being Psychic-type. Maybe it's because in the original series of Pokemon, there was that whole plotline about catching a Ghost-type Pokemon to fight off a Psychic-type Pokemon in Sabrina's gym. So I went with something very different, I think, but I feel like it works. When thinking about Pokemon that are associated to psychic power, I looked at how they're kind of dark and kind of have this aura to them of being scary in some ways. And I wanted to go a different route. I looked at some inspiration with The Jungle Book, which was a movie that I actually watched very recently, and how Kaa the snake is able to hypnotize Mowgli as well as other characters like Bagheera using this brightly colored changing eye shade. And I thought, oh, that's really cool. I wonder what snakes do that naturally. None do. It's not a real thing. I don't know where Rudyard Kipling got that. I don't know where Disney chose to incorporate that into the movie, but I thought since it doesn't exist, I may as well make something that does something similar. So I came up with this snake that's able to change the colors and rearrange these vibrant patterns across its body to hypnotize those around it. Very much a psychic type ability to its physical form. And so we have Bric-a-Brac. The name stems from the idea of stuff being mismatched or not where it should be, and it is the pattern Pokemon. This shiny would definitely take you some time because it's already such a mixed up Pokemon. I think finding this one amongst the rest, even in the overworld, would be a challenge. So how to make a snake into a bug? You can't see it right now, but I am rubbing my temples so very hard because how? What? How? I know what everyone's saying, I know what everyone's thinking, I thought it too for a while. Why don't you just do one of those caterpillars that turns its tail to look like a viper? It felt too on the nose, felt like it had been done, specifically by me. I did a video already where I did that same type of concept, so I decided I had to do something different. I looked up spider, snake, and snake, spider. I looked up all these different variations of this and came across this really interesting snake that actually uses its tail, which is shaped like a spider, to draw in birds. So it hides and waits, camouflaging itself amongst the rocks, wiggling the end of its tail around, which looks a lot. Look this up. It is weird, it is crazy, it is insane how realistic this looks. It wiggles its tail around and it looks like a spider crawling over the rocks. Birds dive down to get the spider, and that's when the snake strikes. Nature is crazy. So I thought I'll come up with a design that very much mimics that idea. I thought of this snake that kind of, rather than being long and lanky, coils itself up to look like a rock and moves its tail around, making that little bug-type Pokemon on top look like it's just kind of skittering around. Maybe eventually I'll make a bug-type that looks similar to the tail mimic, but for this case, I just kind of made a random little bug that I actually fell in love with. I love this guy's little design, but I picture this Pokemon doing the same as the real-life counterpart, drawing in bird Pokemon by making a little bug-looking thing. Being that it's a bug type, I also had to give it a secondary typing, so it's going to end up having the ground typing as well, because while it does do some bug-based abilities, probably firing from that tail mimic, it's still not a bug. I have to be honest about that. It's not a bug. It falls under the bug type category because I needed something to fit here, and after 4 or 5 days of just thinking, sitting alone in my room in the dark, thinking how to make this work, I got tired, so I went with this, and I feel like it does fit in a couple ways. So this is Snekefek. Its name is a play on snake and fake, so Snekefek. It's a bait and switch Pokemon, bug, ground type, and the shiny just brings in that greenish color that I think we associate with bugs, also making it neon so that it's more easily seen. For the fairy prompt, I got to play around with what I wanted to do for a while. I thought, oh, maybe I'll give it these big fairy wings, but that felt like no, because now it's fitting the flying type. And I really didn't want to double up on what I was already trying to fulfill here. So I got this idea while kind of sketching of this masquerade style mask and thought, oh, what if it was a boa constrictor or a viper of some sort associated with Mardi Gras? But as I went in and allowed myself to be fluid with the inspiration, I thought, what if it was a kimono girl? What if it was a snake that hid itself behind this fan-like tail, but still had that elegant beauty to it? So I went with that direction. And I think that that's one of the best things that you can do as an artist is free yourself up to change your design. I changed this one a lot. I mean, a lot. I initially went in, like I said, maybe it'll have wings, maybe it'll have a fairy crown, maybe it'll be the tower that Rapunzel is trapped on top of. But in the end, decided on this, and I really like the inspiration. It has this energy to it that makes me think that it's kind of that Pokemon of each region, the one that's just weirdly too attractive. You know what Pokemon they are, I know what Pokemon they are. I don't need to go down the list, but if you'd like to, head down to the comments and let me know what it is. Then we can argue whether that Pokemon was designed to be that way or you're just seeing something that wasn't there. Regardless, I went in and I played around with this design and I really dig it. I even went into this collar and made it almost this Venus flytrap type of aesthetic where it is this big fake mouth because the beauty of this Pokemon is meant to lure you in. Snakes are predators. That's kind of what they're known for. They're not known for being hyper peaceful. They're known for being scary, despite the fact that they often aren't. They're little noodle puppies, and we love them. And for those of us who have snakes as pets, not me, I wish, you know how gentle they can be. Little puppies, little noodle puppies. But this one is definitely playing up that scary predator vibe. So this is Combra. The name is a play on kimono and cobra, the decorative Pokemon. It is a fairy type, and I imagine this thing has a crazy, cool, and interesting dex entry. So let me know down in the comments what you think that would be. I love hearing that from you guys. But I couldn't delay the winged snake allegations forever. I knew I'd eventually have to get into it, especially with a flying type, and every other idea that I came up with really turned out to no, that fits more into the grass type. No, that fits more into the rock type. No, that fits more into this other type. And I really wanted something that felt like a flying type. So I did the basics. I did Quetzalcoatl because that tends to be what works. If you want to see a really good Quetzalcoatl design for a Fakemon, check out Subjectively. He did a fantastic job for his Maza region, and I could never compete. But I knew going in I had to do something very different to what he already had. Given that this is kind of the go-to for Snake with wings, I had a lot that was working against me. There was so much inspiration and so many concepts that other people and other creators had already done that I was actually nervous to look up any inspiration for this, so I didn't. I just went in knowing what Quetzalcoatl looked like as a winged snake thing and played around with the idea a lot. Well, a little bit. Well, a little bit of a lot. And hopefully came out with something that at least works. It's not one of my favorite designs, but it does suffice the prompt, and maybe it's someone else's. I'm surprised very often how much that even when I don't say, hey, I didn't like this Pokemon or it wasn't my favorite, there's still people who really enjoy those designs. You guys see stuff that I don't, and I think that is amazing. It really allows me as a creator to feel some confidence in that just because it's a design that I don't like doesn't mean that other people won't like it. My least favorite Pokemon is Bramblegast, and whenever I say that, I have people who say that they really enjoy that Pokemon. Same thing goes for like Revavroom. People say, hey, I actually really like Revavroom. That opinion is valid. It's wrong, but it's valid. So this is Coatlicquax, Feathered Serpent Pokemon. It is a flying dragon type. For the shiny, I went with this coloring that almost evokes kind of a blue jay with that bare, fleshy head, kind of like a vulture mixed with a blue jay, and I dig it. I actually ended up kind of liking this Pokemon. Moving right along, our next design was one that I did not know where I wanted to go with it. As I played around and just kind of sat there sketching and having my recording going, I ended up coming up with something that I really like. I went with this much more thin type of look, but got to balance that out by this lumpy type of shaping throughout the body. I thought about how snakes will eat their prey and then it'll just kind of sit within them as this big lump within them for weeks as it slowly digests. So I thought, what about a snake who's much like me in these instances, bitten off more than they can chew? Especially with it being a dark type, I thought, okay, dark types have a lot of bite moves, so maybe this Pokemon should be based on eating. So I went with that, and I'm really happy that I did, because I think the shape language used in this design is so much fun, and it's so much more erratic than what I would normally come up with. I love this buildup of like stuck food in the body of this snake. It's not choking, it's not going through a Cramorant type of design element, but it still is that. It constantly has something in its body that it is digesting, so that was a ton of fun. The bigger part that came was how to break up the colors and the shapes. I knew what shapes I wanted, but how to break those up so it wasn't just one big blob. I also knew that it being a dark type, I wanted it to be exciting. I wanted it to have some variation that made it not just, okay, dark type Pokemon, so must be black or gray. It's still gonna be black or gray, but I wanted to be able to apply some variation that gave it a little bit more personality than just, by the way, here's the dark type snake that I had to do. I really ended up liking this Pokemon a lot. I went in hoping that, okay, maybe it'll work out, maybe it'll be okay, because I really like the shapes used here, but in the end, I really like this design. I think it works on a couple different levels, and the inspiration of an actual real life thing that snakes do just amped it up an extra couple steps for me in how much that I enjoy this design. I know I'm biased because I made it, but tough. So this is Gagamba. Its name is a play on Gag and Black Mamba. So Gagamba is the overeating Pokemon, and it is a dark poison type. That shiny brings in those purples and that pale bluish green that I really dig, really gives that sickly type of look that I love for these type of Pokemon. As we move on, I knew that eventually I would have to tackle the normal type, and I'd been thinking about this for a long time. Should it just be a snake? Should it just be a regular, plain old whatchamacallit type of snake? And as I kept thinking, I thought, no, I want to do something a little bit more fun for the normal type. I want to give it some viability and make it feel like it works, not just as a cool design, but as a fun little joke type of character as well. So I thought, well, whenever you do sock puppets, they kind of look like snakes in a lot of ways, right? So I got the chance and the opportunity of a lifetime to make a sock into a Pokemon. Taking something so simple and giving it life by imbuing it with the powers of an animal is so fun, so cool, and while I was scared on how it would look, how it would work out, I am so excited by how this turned out. I think that it is one of my favorite of the video, just with how simple and dumb it is. Like, there's not a thought behind those eyes, and I love him. He really is just like me, and I would definitely have this guy on my team. I know it looks a little bit too much like Tatsugiri, but that's tough. I dig him. I like him a lot. Tatsugiri's not one of my favorite Pokemon. I don't like his mechanic. I don't like his gimmick, but this Pokemon, for some reason, fills the void for me in my heart that Tatsugiri should have had. It is so much fun, and let me know down in the comments if you watched this and it took you a second to realize I was drawing a sock. So this is Arcole. The name is a play on Coil, as well as Argyle, which is a pattern associated with socks. It is the cozy Pokemon, a pure normal type, and its shiny is a worn out gray athletic sock. But being that it's a sock, I knew that there had to be a fun gimmick for it. So I thought, what if this Pokemon actually has a couple different variations of different color? What if it was almost like Spinda, where there were just like millions of different versions? Maybe that's a little too much. Let's say hundreds. So there's 100 or so different variations of color for this Pokemon, and to get it to evolve, you have to catch 2 that are the exact same color. Once you have 2, you have a pair of socks, which allows this Pokemon to evolve into this bundle of socks that's kind of wadded together in very much the same way that you would kind of fold socks when you get them out of the laundry to make sure that you don't lose them. These Pokemon are further intertwined together, never to be separated again, as this Pokemon evolves by you having 2 matching socks. Is it obvious that I love this design? I think it's pretty obvious that I love this design. Super simple, and if I'm being completely fair with you guys, one of the first Fakemon that I ever designed myself in like my modern era of art, years back, before YouTube, before Instagram, was a Pokemon based on folded laundry. Maybe eventually I'll share that, but I think that's such a weird and crazy design that actually ended up coming back for this video in a couple different ways, and I like it. This is one of my favorite Pokemon of the video, if not my favorite Pokemon of the video, and it's based on a pair of socks. Who would have thought? We come in saying we're going to design a bunch of different snake Pokemon. Snakes are inherently cool, but it ends up being the socks that really steal the show for me, with Paracole. Its name is a play on pair of socks, as well as Coil, the cozy Pokemon, a pure normal type, and the shiny is now full black and gray. Rather than being that worn out type of color, it is that athletic or sporty or business type of sock. So these are all of our snake Pokemon. We did it. One for every type, obviously bringing in the ones that already existed in a ton of different ways here. It feels rounded out, it feels complete. I can sleep easy now. And before we go, I want to give a shout out to Toxic Thoughts, who created the music that you've been hearing for the background of this video. Really talented creator. I'll have their information down below. They've been working with me on a couple different projects, so it's really cool. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, do all that stuff that makes YouTube really happy and makes me happy as well. But what makes me really happy is getting the support from you guys across Patreon and Ko-fi, and a special shout out, big uppies, big respect to some of our higher tier supporters. Those being Kaylin Cat, Soren Frost, Stix TV, Jesse Badger, Teacup Cryptid, Dan Bush, Ko-fi supporter, as well as, finally, last but not least, Tony F. Thank you guys so much for allowing this channel to exist, allowing me to create stuff here that's a ton of fun. Sounds like you all know where to find me, and I'll catch you in the next one. Bye.